on the south coast of England in the ancient kingdom of Wessex. And we had a recent discovery. We had 54 Viking bodies found with their heads removed. And apparently 3 heads were missing. They think they might have put those heads on a spike as a warning to others. They've been unearthed, and they did various kind of strontium tests on the teeth, and they found that these were from further north, Norway, Sweden sort of way, a lot colder area. So we think they might have been mercenaries, and 54 of them were led up to the hill on Portland in Dorset, and examination showed their heads were removed from the front, which shows they had a warrior's death and wanted to face their executioner. So that's a very interesting story to look up. It's in the well, it's all over the internet at the moment. You can look it up. Just look up Viking burials Portland, and it comes up. It's very interesting indeed. And as far as history goes, we have a historian and researcher of the occult and author, Michael Tsarion, who has very kindly joined us tonight. And we'll bring him in and say hello. Hello, Michael Tsarion.
Hello, Patrick. Nice to be on. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Welcome back. The Female Illuminati. That's the subject we're going to discuss as much as we can tonight. We're on for a couple of hours, I presume. Are you okay for a couple of hours?
Oh, sure.
Superb. And the last 45 minutes to half, we'll take questions from the chat box on thesechangingtimesradio.ning.com. So if you are tuned in, join the site and put your questions in the chat box for Michael. Is that okay, Michael?
Oh, absolutely.
Superb. The Female Illuminati, where to begin, really? It's not something you normally associate with the Illuminati because we know that the Freemasons, for example, are very... well, they don't allow women into the Freemasonic orders, and I wondered how that sort of tallied with the Illuminati.
Oh, yes, that's quite correct. On the surface, the various secret societies and, of course, historically speaking, religion, and, of course, that goes for Judaism or Christianity and Islam as well, all the major religions appear to be, on the surface, male. And that's, to use the technical term, patristic or paternalistic. And there's no doubt about it that there are certain enclaves within these organizations that are extremist in their misogyny and in their masculinity. There's no doubt about that. However, as I've said in all my previous work, when it comes to, and I think that people who've really been researching heavily on the new kind of a Da Vinci Code, stroke Templar, stroke, Magdalene concepts, clearly see the truth of what I've said in my previous work about there being an exoteric branch, if you want to call it that, versus the esoteric branch within establishment. So although on the surface one can be seduced into believing that the esoteric branch, as put forward in books like the Da Vinci Code, one can be seduced into thinking they're the good guys. Wow, look at these fanatics on the other side. And they may even be able to garner a certain kind of tacit allegiance where we tend to think more positively about these sort of Rosicrucian, Templar, Masonic. Look at the tough time they've had. They only mean well. Ultimately, I guess we could forgive their crimes because they had this other, papal kind of oppression taking place. This is what the establishment has been doing now for at least 20 years, slowly, gradually putting this scenario in front of us. I think I've always warned people to be cautious about that because even though these rivalries certainly do exist, there's no question about that the rivalries have existed from the 11th century onwards. That doesn't mean that then we, the normal people of the world coming in, should necessarily be fooled into taking sides, because, as I've said, there's an esoteric branch and an exoteric branch, but unfortunately, it's all Atonism, or it's all the Luciferian Serpentine Brotherhood with their inevitable rivalries, because, of course, they're all bloody psychopaths. So, you can't really prove to Michael Tsarion that one version of psychopathy here and one version of megalomania and one version of genocide throughout the world, for centuries, is now can be sort of accepted and condoned just because the other side are even more sick. So, that's what my particular slant is, that we're not going to exonerate any Templars or any Rosicrucians or any, Masons just because their genocidal conflicts and conquests have been slightly less egregious than the more official ones that have been more known down through history. Now, then a subset of that is the re-questioning of whether or not that these organizations are, in fact, purely paternalistic, because on surface, as we said, they are. On the surface, they appear to be. But then when you start tracing the symbolism and the etymology, another story opens up that kind of changes that. As we said, this is a vast subject, and it's going to take independent maverick researchers like myself long time, most of our lives, to study this. This is not something one book or one DVD or one presentation ever is going to come to the bottom of. It's very, very deep. And when you start following the symbolism, it's like a landscape that opens up. And you're getting wider and wider. It's like that old metaphor of the mountain I've often used. The higher you get up the mountain, you're kind of out of breath. But my goodness, what larger vistas you see that you didn't see just, a few days ago. So as we progress up the mountain of knowledge, the mountain of truth, you look back and you see a lot more. And the symbolism and the etymology, as far as I'm concerned, alters this consensus about the paternalistic front, the paternalistic image that is given when we think that, as you said in the beginning, it's only a matter of mad, crazy men doing their thing. Well, you see, unfortunately, the symbolism and the etymology tells a different story, and then simple common sense tells you that the Stalins and the Ivan the Terribles, and certainly the Godfrey the Bouillons and the William the Conquerors and who have you. I mean, didn't they have mothers? Didn't they have wives? And didn't they have sisters? Well, then I have to ask a question. What kind of morality did these women teach their megalomaniac sons, who then grew up to put the world to the sword? So even from that purely common sense point of view, non-research point of view, we have a bloody question right there. And then, of course, if you dipped into a bona fide female crime, whether it's Lucretia Borgia, or say somebody like Countess Elizabeth Bathory, you can also bring that in if you want. I don't necessarily put too heavy an aspect on that, because my researches lead me to a more sinister group of people than just your average sort of female psychopath. I'm talking about a sisterhood here that is very, very concealed. So much so that, as you hinted earlier, nobody's ever picked up on this before. You have to go very, very far down the research of the etymology and the symbolism to even begin sniffing this rat, and also because it has been deliberately concealed. And I think that to finish answering your question, I believe that it has not only actively concealed itself, pathologically so, but that the image of the patristic front is part of that concealment. And therefore, when we start, to give you an anecdote about the symbolism, it's the one Jordan Maxwell has often referred to time and time again, about how not only the rabbis, but the Christian potentates are wearing the symbols of the female, they're wearing the garments, the flowing garments. You do walk through womb-shaped edifices when you go into shrines and temples and cathedrals and mosques. That kind of thing. And we're talking now, my research has gone very deep into this, about the etymologies, incredible information I'll be sharing in the DVD as we're producing that now, to show that, in fact, this organization exists. It has been pathologically hidden through pathological fear. It's been hidden. And also it's hidden precisely by that image that most people have, that these institutions of great power and these criminal institutions are primarily male-dominated and male-driven. I now think that needs to be reevaluated quite seriously, which is what my work does.
Really? That's quite an astonishing statement, really, because we're used to being told and used to reading, even in the unauthorized sort of biographies and histories of people, that it is a male-dominated game. So you say that it's extremely well hidden, more so than usual, more secretive than usual. So your people in the public eye, like the Queen of England, the various royal families of Europe, Beatrice, etc., and the large corporations, the CEOs, the open politicians who are on the television, even the Queen and the royal families may even be a front for this sisterhood of death, as you call it.
Yes, exactly that. And let's make no mistake about it, however, that I am not in any sense of the word exonerating the crime that has been orchestrated by the male. This is not about taking sides or exonerating these psychopaths. It's just a deeper look at the nature of the whole movement. Where does the word queen even come from? Where did this idea of the queen on her throne come? The seat, the whole idea of a seat of power. Yeah, the whole concept of the symbolism. But yes, in a nutshell, but see, you're right. It's difficult for people to grasp in the beginning. In fact, it's difficult for people even on a street level to even conceive of female crime, the depth of female crime. It's something that, well, let's put it this way, just in the same way that a person who suffered under a female tyranny, say a mother figure or the neglect, these are more your common garden situations. It's well known to psychologists that, in fact, let's even forget about the women for a minute. Any kind of crime, any kind of pain, any kind of trauma, that's the word we're really looking for here, trauma. The mind has a natural capacity to block it out. Therefore, if you speak to an individual who suffered trauma, they tend to not want to talk about it. They have difficulty talking about it. And in most scenarios, it's repressed. We disassociate from it, okay?
Like World War II veterans.
Everything, right across the board, right? You can almost see this ubiquitously from that, what you just said, to mega, think of the people who even went through, Dr. Cameron, Dr. Delgado type of, horrible experimentation, there's a tremendous dissociation that takes place. Well, that's what you have to consider when we are dealing with the kind of universal crime that I'm talking about. It's almost, can you imagine, erased, not on the individual level. It's not repressed on the individual level. It's repressed on the collective level. In other words, a crime so vast, so horrific, that the entire psyche itself, collectively, almost erased it, dissociated from it. It's almost erased from the racial history so that there's almost not a snifter left of it. This is what we see on the street. I again emphasize, this is what we see on the street level with trauma. What I'm talking about is no different except of its magnitude. It is something of a larger, magnitude that has been forgotten, and then we forgot about it on a global level, and it's only now through my research that I've been able to get a snifter of it and follow it into the dark corners, and I guess my eyes over the years have become acclimatized to the dark, so to speak, in this movement, and so I kept on going so that finally I would see what other people wouldn't see. I'm going very slowly with this, of course, for obvious reasons, so that when I do present the research, in a month's time or whatever, it'll be nicely put together in the same way that we did Architects of Control and my other work. We'll try to do a really good job to it so that all questions are answered. And I think it's about time. If you remember, for instance, in my Atlantis book back 10 years ago now, I did say that by this time, and I wasn't just talking about 2012 in particular, I was talking about the age that we're going through. In 10 years or so, we will have the secrets of the origins and the nature of the human race. The human race will have now a handle on the greater mysteries of who we are, where we come from, and that involves prehistoric, world. And we will have those answers. And I am completely believing that this research either concludes this line of research that I started with the Atlantis book, and certainly jumpstarts a new vision, which hasn't been in the world before, into this question of the sisterhood and their role. As I say again, it doesn't exonerate any other crimes that have been done. That's not what we're doing here. We're not apportioning blame, frivolously, but we are looking at some incredible, dark, deep secret that has never been confided, because I actually believe this sisterhood is active in the world today, and that they've made a great deal of effort to conceal the records of what happened in the past, and it's never been written down before. they've made sure that the editing is almost complete. I mean, absolutely fantastic job has been done on this, and I believe that the overwhelming blame game that is partly justifiable that has been put on the male edifices and male institutions is to lead our attention to that, so that this other realm, this other dark pages of the criminal history of mankind is almost completely neglected. I mean, really, top shelf, dusty, hasn't been taken down and hasn't been opened and looked into. It's that bad, and it's been that well covered up.
So, presumably there's a fair share of red herrings sort of left along the trail.
Many. Unfortunately, there are many. Now, again, when you study the symbolism, though, you're on to a good thing. I mean, they have left loopholes. When I say that they've edited the history and they've, excised it, these people have a strange, and I've covered this many times when we've talked about the other secret societies.
They can't resist it, can they? Yeah.
They can't, exactly. And some
even
bizarre...
even if it risks exposing them, they stick to the atomist kind of symbolism. They just can't resist it, I guess.
I don't know how it is. I don't know how it is. Maybe if we talk to a detective about the history of any major criminal, they would probably say the same thing. I don't know. I'm just glad that they have, because in fact, you're right. They have left trails, and this is what we'll be presenting in the DVD. I kind of already went into this. If people are familiar with my Age of Manipulation 1, it's up on YouTube on Slave Films. We did it in Europe. I already introduced this concept there when we talked about various satanic organizations that were headed by women, particularly like Tuesday Weld and Christy McManus and various other sinister female characters who have been known to be sorceresses. They are sorcerers. They come from old family lines. So we dipped into that, and we showed that by no means are these people mind-controlled victims. By the way, this is another incredible... In fact, it's actually taken me a long time to get to this work because of couldn't stand up straight for the laughter of the rest of the community who actually believes that these, who are we talking about here? The Madonnas and the Beyoncés and who else? The Lady Gagas and the Whitney Houstons. Everybody
sure we'll get to that.
Poor Michael Jackson, what a victim. Poor Lady Gaga doesn't know what she's doing. I've been convulsed with so much laughter over this since I've seen this shit being spoken of, that it took a time to get over it. But when I finished weeping and laughing, it's like, and again I showed in my Age of Manipulation 1 that is a preposterous theory. I don't know where it came from, and it has to be. That's also one of the things that I think needs to be completely reevaluated. Is that no. King Prince Edward's wife and Queen Christina and the von Thyssen family and the Lady Rothschild and God knows who you mentioned a few yourself, let alone humongous characters, black nobility creatures like Queen Victoria back then, and I said the mothers and wives of the Godfrey de Bouillons and what have you. Yeah, really makes sense, doesn't it, to say that all the men are active, but these women are just poor mind-controlled victims, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work today when you look at these media creatures. It just doesn't sing, and anyone who's telling you that is either a false teacher or they're very, very early stages of understanding, and it certainly doesn't work when you look at the catalogue of history. It certainly doesn't, and that one has to be completely reevaluated as far as I'm concerned, and the episodes, the events that have happened in the media of the last year even, or even the last couple of months, has again brought this out of the woodwork, and everybody's crying and weeping about thinking all these poor victims, it's total nonsense. There are victims of mind control. I'm certainly not negating that, but you only have to listen to the writings and the revelations of these women who have exposed the mind control, like the Kathy O'Briens you see, and the others. They also show you that women are involved. They're under no doubt about it at all, that women are actively, consciously involved in all of this. It's not just so easy to write it off as that they're the victims. This is totally wrong.
Okay, well, let's take the public figures that we do know about. The Queen of England, for example. I know you've gone into extensive research of the royal families of Europe before, but you talked in one of your earlier talks with another radio producer. I forget his name now, but it was one of the best interviews I've ever heard from you. It was, I have it here. I'll find it in a second or two. But you were talking about the Queen of England, the royal families, and I wanted to ask you if you could extend what you were saying about the cap of maintenance, to maintain, to perpetuate or keep in order until some other event occurs or until the arrival of a sovereign of greater rank. So we're trying to unveil who's behind the public figures like the Queen of England, and this may be the key. I mean, in whose name or place does the Queen and her court preside and maintain the state as stewards or caretakers, as I'm quoting yourself there. So these people are stewards. Who are they waiting for?
Oh, yes, they are. The Stuart dynasty has that name because that implies steward,
Right.
as you rightly say. The cap of maintenance, and this was, I'm glad you reminded me, this was in a thing that's on YouTube as well called the Queen's Coronation. If people just put in my name, followed by the Queen's Coronation or something like that, I think that's up. That was part of a DVD series. We modulated it and put it on the web. That also dips into this whole female sisterhood thing as well. I'm glad you reminded me of that, Patrick. And yes, the vicar, even the word vicar, which is used by both Catholic and Protestant potentates, it means vicarious, which means through me. In Irish Origins, Volume 2, I have a chapter called Servant of the Servants of God. That is actually the title of the Pope. Now, it's very important to grasp this, and people can look it up on Wikipedia. Servant of the Servants of God. Now, if it was that the Pope was the servant of Jesus, then it would say servant of the servant, singular, of God, being that Jesus is the servant of God. And yes, I would then understand when the Pope says, I am the servant of him. But it doesn't say that. It says the servant of the servants, plural. And this then is one of those rats that need to be smelt out. And hang on a minute. Who the hell are these servants, plural? Well, there you are. So somebody over this researcher over here says it's the cult of Mithras, don't you know? Because Constantine was a Mithras. There's a solar cult. Jordan Maxwell, solar cult. Michael Tsarion, Atmos, solar cult. Luciferian, solar cult. Got it? Then over here somebody else is saying Sol Invictus. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's over there. So again, on the surface, you have the solar cult, and sunlight blinds us. So could it be that it's not to say that these institutions are not powerful? They certainly are. But there's always the other side. There's always the lunar side. And this is now what I'm investigating.
Feminine side, right.
Yes, exactly. Because look, all the popes in Rome have short hair. I mean, these are very trivial things, but I look for these things. You know, they have the usual monkish haircut or the very short hair. Merovingians in France and in Germany, ancient peoples whose actual order, the Templars, even put popes on the throne. Well, hang on a minute. But the Merovingian kings all had long hair, just like the Sikhs of northern India and various other groups like the Druids. They had kept their hair long. So why are they keeping their hair long? Why do the potentates wear the flowing robes? And why is this female symbolism absolutely ubiquitous throughout all of the churches, cathedrals, and what have you?
Why do they dress like girls? Exactly, right.
Why do they do that? And then you say, well, wait a minute, then they have this cult of the Virgin Mary. And you go, okay, let's check that out for a minute. And then this whole other avenue opens up, and you start seeing that, hang on a minute, could it be then that these, and by the way, that there's been writers who've shown deep connections between the Templars, and by the way, that also includes a group known as the Cistercians. The Cistercians and Templars are identical. One is the military wing, and the Cistercians are the monastic wing. Well, there's authors that have shown that the Cistercian order is almost identical to the information that we now know about the ancient Essenes, who are meant to be Jewish, although we don't really know that for sure, and also a group called the Mandeans, this cult of the Mandeans that's almost practically extinct. But then they add this incredibly interesting anecdote, and that is that the Mandeans and the Essenes and various other of these groups didn't worship Jesus. They, on the contrary, worshiped John the Baptist. But then as you go further and start discovering that the Baptist symbol isn't normally associated with any type of male figure, that's a load of bogus nonsense. It's actually associated with the female anointer, Jean. In the French, John is Jean, which is Jean, right? So now we have this thing going where you start to maybe, and I'm cutting a lot of story short here, but these Templar types, again, we're talking about the esoteric branch now. these esoteric branches, and I don't care if you're Masonic or you're Knights Templar or whatever you are, they appear to be worshipping an externally masculine-looking creature, deity, God King, what have you. But that God King, and by the way, this was even pointed out in the Da Vinci Code, of the incredible feminine features of Jesus and John. In fact, they show that Da Vinci, doesn't that movie entirely revolve around that famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci? And the whole point is that Mary Magdalene is made to look like a male disciple, but in fact it's a woman with red hair sitting there. So they're even admitting this themselves. So when you pick up that piece, don't let it go. Pick that piece up and follow it and find out, is it true that these Templars then were using, to keep the world happy and to keep the papacy happy, the hard, the more extremist, masculine Atonists, but they had dipped into too much Druidism. While they were in France, did you know that Godfrey de Bouillon and the head of the Cistercians, brought this out in Irish Origins, this guy called Bernard de Clairvaux, had all been educated by Chaldean monks from Ireland, and those Chaldean monks were sifting through all the records and the traditions of the Druids that they had slaughtered. So this esoteric branch has got one foot very much in the normal Christian, Judaic almost, if you will, background, because Troyes in France and Burgundy, where these Knights Templars came from, had some of the largest Jewish communities dating back as far as the 10th century. So they had one foot in this old old Judaism and Christianity, proto-Christianity. And then they had one foot in the new neo-paganism, which later became the Christianity, coming out of the Irish Chaldeans. So that's why you see all the symbolism. So then when you look at all of this, that's why they had their hair long. That's why they referred to themselves as the long-haired kings. That's why they worship the severed, bearded head. It's not because the severed head is not to do with actually a physical event in which John the Baptist's head was cut off. It had to do with the taking of power from one source and transferring it to another. The severed head or the severed column or the fallen pyramid or what have you, all this Masonic symbolism, is simply a representative, is a simple metaphor for the transference of great power from one figurehead, one grandmaster to the other. But the point I'm getting to is this. Why did they make it that it was a Salome figure, right, female figure, just in the same way you have with the Liliths and the Eves and the Delilahs and what have you? Why did they create the story? Why did the mythmongers include that the cutting of the head and the transference of power was under the auspices of a female? And so there is that trail of the symbolism again, showing something that's a little bit, the recurrent motifs. So the upshot of all of this is that although on the surface, for the public view, for the outer courts, to which many of these even highbrows belong, not all of them are initiated into what we're talking about. These people do believe they're worshipping Akhenaton, they're worshipping his descendants, they're involved with solar cult worship and what have you, and that's fine and dandy because the sun has always played a central role in all of this worship from the dawn of time. It's not going to go away, and it's just part of it. It's just part of it. But then you also start seeing the symbols of the crescent moon, the long hair, the star, the five-pointed pentagram, and that wait till you see what we've got. I mean, we're going to be showing stuff that's bloody mind-boggling here about this symbolism is not just so strictly solar. Why do we end prayers with Amen? This kind of thing. So there's another workings here. There's another workings behind the bigger cog. And the very fact that you have this, as we said, the chairs of power, the seat of power, the rhetoric. Why is there a Statue of Liberty? Why is the whole of America, and should we say the American experiment, under the shadow of a female statue that is not only embodies a lot of sacred geometry, but it's actually based on an ancient goddess from Egypt called Seshet, right? What's that all about? Why do we have, the portals of the doorways and so on? And why do we have these strange secret society anecdotes? If you walk into the Knights of Malta headquarters in Rome, in their main hall, this vast building, the only painting that they have there is that beheading of John the Baptist. So most exoteric researchers go, well, that's because we've twigged it. We can tell you all about that. We've written books telling you that they're not worshipping Jesus, they're worshipping John the Baptist. That's why they got that there. And the Templars are just having a right laugh. They go, fantastic, brilliant. Because the whole symbolism hasn't been cracked yet. That John the Baptist never existed as a person any more than Jesus did in the way presented in the Bible, right? These are themselves stand-ins for something else. The symbolism is right in front of you. And if you can't read the symbolism...
These figures, Jesus and John the Baptist, may well just be allegories in themselves.
They were. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not discounting the work of Ralph Ellis and others who have targeted a male Jesus, but that's not what we're talking about. I'm saying that as were presented in the Bible for hundreds of years, those Johns and Moseses and John the Baptist are certainly not the same. If a Ralph Ellis or a Tony Squishby had said, yeah, but Michael, I have discovered, the physical, a more historical, I'm with them. They're my colleagues. I totally have used their work in my books and mentioned it time and time again, and I'm all for that. If you have found a biographical character, but that biographical character, you admit yourself, is not the one as presented in the Bible. Far from it. You've just used the Bible like I do as a backdrop, as a certain, Ariadne's thread, so to speak. But that character that you have discovered is very, very, very slight resemblance to the Solar King as presented by St. Paul in the Gospels. See, and that's what I'm talking about. So John the Baptist, and this even goes for the Melchizedeks and the Sauls, the Davids, the Solomons, the Abrahams, even the Jehovah. My God, wait till you see what I've got for that when we get into the Trees of Life, book that's coming out in a month's time and other stuff. So even all of that, these are characters that have been either completely concocted, mythologically speaking, or they're composite characters, or they're purely, as you say, allegorical, to synthesize huge constellations of Masonic symbolism. And until the human race wises up to discover how this is done, they're going to be under a state of sort of mesmerism or hypnotism, because this kind of stuff still goes on. Every time you turn the television on, this is exactly what's going on. Every time you watch one of these, Super Bowls, and you see all this weird female symbolism and coming out of the egg and with all the weird costumery of a previous age, it's happening now. It's happening in the commercials now. It's happening in the ad copy now. Like I showed in Age of Manipulation 1. So we have to crack it. And it's no good just pointing to that these women are mind-controlled or this group over here is just purely male. From now on, this needs to be looked at in a completely different way. All this illusion, all of this idiocy and infantile idea that these people don't know what they're talking about, poor them, is got to go if we want to sharpen up and wise up to see what is really going on. Because they're laughing at us. They're laughing at the human race.
Well, you have to wonder when you look at the Queen of England, and I'm going to come back to Madonna and the Super Bowl extravaganza very soon. You have to look at the Queen in a new light, because already we know that she's the grand patron of Freemasonry, right?
Yes.
And the
St.
royal,
John's. Get this.
And the Knights of the Royal Garter. That's
the
not
Garter?
the right term, is it? Yeah, the Order of the Garter.
That's right. The Order of the Garter.
There you have. They've allowed a woman who historically in Freemasonry and other high orders like the Templars have not been important, merely figureheads like Queen Elizabeth I or something. But here, when you take into account the ceremony that you've done an excellent job dissecting, the coronation, you have to think again. And now you've brought this new information to light from your research. It certainly compounds the idea that because we've already been given the impression that the Queen has no real power, that it's the government now, and we're all very democratic, etc. All that crap, right? So we fell for that for a couple of 100 years, and the last 50 years, really, she's been demoted in the public eye to a sort of purely ceremonial figure, that it's just for the tourists, etc. When all the time she's having a little wry Masonic grin. And she may be more important than we realise. You quoted Genesis 49:10. The sceptre will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from beneath his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of nature is his. As you mentioned, it's another reference to waiting. What are they waiting for? Who is the one? Is it who you think it is? Is it the obvious?
No, it's nothing to do with the devil worship in the hard sense, even though these people are definitely ritualistic in their nature. You see, a couple of anecdotes. You just mentioned the fact that the Queen runs the Order of the Garter. Let's just look at that for a minute before I jump to your question. A garter is a belt. Simple. It's a belt worn by a knight. But as Ralph Ellis has shown, that garter actually goes back to the Hyksos nobility and their worship of the god Set. All right? Then you say that she's also the head of these are all what we know as the Alpha Lodges of Freemasonry, and she's very senior in it. The Order of the Garter is but one manifestation. It's symbolized by the red cross, which also is connected to Set and to these other Merovingian dynasties going back. And it's also to the sisterhood as well, let's never forget.
And
she's also the head
on its sleeve, yeah.
Yes, and she's also the head of a group called the Order of St. Michael and St. George. Both those characters fought a dragon. And we have Pendragon, right? So the dragon is a female symbol, by the way. When you see equestrian statues of all these, all over the world, I don't care where you go. There's one of Godfrey de Bouillon himself in Brussels, and you got one wherever you are and wherever I am. There they are. There's equestrian statues of the great chief and the knight or the king on a horse. It's a play on words. The word horse is actually a onomatopoeia, or it's a assonance for the word. It's a stand-in for the word whores. This is the way they do things. The word whore, like whore of Babylon, horse, right, with a W-H-O-R-E, is a pun on the word whore. So when you see the knights in armor with their swords and their, thunderbolts, and they're sitting on the horse, hear that laughter again, because these guys are playing with you, and they do this in the numerology, and they do this in the numbers as well. When you see a thing called, remember we were saying that officially women are not meant to be involved in Freemasonry, it's a total lie, because there's many Freemasonic lodges. They've been going for years. And for instance, one thing that I harp on a lot in the Irish Origins book is the daughter of Akhenaten, who went by the name Meritaten, Mary of Aton, and her nickname was Scota, or Scotia, right? Scota is where Scotland got its name. And it's where Scottish Rite Freemasonry get their name. So again, hear that laughter when people thinking that you're talking about Scottish Rite Freemasonry and that comes from that's the old land of Scotland and all that. No, it's not. It's not a reference to the land. It is not a reference to the land. And if you look closely at the compass and protractors of the Scottish Rite, what do you see at the top of the compass? The face of Akhenaten. I'm not making it up. There it is. And then down the side of the right-hand side of the compass, Scottish Rite. Head of Akhenaten at the top. Scotta Rite. Scotia Rite. His daughter's right on the right-hand side with the 33 degrees. Yeah. And then at the top of the 33rd degree, Knights of the Royal Secret, etc., etc. And this big whopping G symbol in the middle, it don't stand for God and it doesn't stand for geometry. Because the G in lowercase, as I pointed out time and time again since the time of the Atlantis book, is the serpentine G. If you write the G in lowercase, it's the symbol of the Dragon Brotherhood, which is a female symbol, all right? It comes from the Gaionium. And the Gaionium, years ago, centuries ago as a matter of fact, in order to conceal their existence, the Gaion, or the Gaionate, or the Gaionium, changed their name to Freemason. So the Freemasons far predate the 17th century. That's another, they can barely contain their laughter on that one with all the scholars saying, well, they don't date back further than the 18th century. Yeah. Okay, right. Now that we're back to Sanityville, now we find out wrong. They date way, way back. That's where all the Egyptian symbolism is coming from. So there's a lot of it, but a lot of it, though, is this female symbolism. The pentagram will be on these Masonic jewels, these diadems, and lots of other symbols like the brazen serpent and what have you that totally clearly show you that there's something else going on here. So they play with this idea that, and the one that they're waiting for, to answer your question, is the descendant of Akhenaten, the pulling together all of the different cults. This has been something that's happened. It's not an easy job, and it's taken centuries. And remember, ultimately, these people are so addicted to world, enslavement. Right. They're so addicted to, they found it a bloody hard task, even with all their power. Even with all of their power, they still have a chore. And I'd like to get into this interview if we can, as to what happened. This takes us right back, this whole answer to your question of why the delay and why the waiting is because of the event that I spoke about in the Atlantis book, which was the War of the Gods, which subsequently led to the destruction of all the technology.
Well, I've often wondered that. I mean, if they have so much power that they've accumulated over the centuries, and they hate humankind so much that they want to reduce the world's population by 90%, and they have the weapons to do it, they have neutron bombs, they can wipe us out in one chemtrail day. They still need us at some stage. So what are they waiting for? With all the power they have, what are they waiting for? So this is perfect. This explains a great deal why they're flapping around and delaying. Yeah, sure, big chore to do. The great work.
They have to.
Is that the great work? Is that the great work that needs to be completed then?
Yes, and remember, they're not in charge. They're not in charge. Like I said in the Atlantis book, they have edicts handed down from some very sinister forces, both terrestrial and extraterrestrial. And since the time of John Dee, they've been working to a program. And they can hurry the program in some respects, and they have to go grindingly slow in others because they're under orders. They have been given they've been given commandments of how to vacate this planet and do the other things that I was talking about, including the enslavement of the human race and many other things that I'll be getting into in the work. But this is a huge hydra. I mean, when I may have said it only in a couple of lines. I may have said it, I think I did, just a couple of lines. I think it was something like, oh, in order to do this, they had to enslave the entire planet. And then I moved on to something else. Because how could you possibly... But then read back. What does it take for a tiny little country like England to literally do that? To literally go and seize the mineral resources of every little country and big country and continent in the world. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years just to put one. Then I talked about the development of the computer and how silicon was involved in it. So the whole process is taking incredible amount of time and has to be done meticulously. And then you have some very good brains that are moving things forward incredibly fast. And then you've got a bunch of useless bastards that you maybe even, take one step forward and 10 steps back. They're not the best. So, and then, of course, you have this vast group workforce. Now, let's go back. Can we go back? Because I want to get into this. This is
sure,
at the time. Let's go back. In the beginning of this research, and we're talking now specifically about the female Illuminati research here, I kept on worrying because I went so deeply into the Book of Enoch. And remember, you're talking about the Atlantis book being a tiny, tiny fragment of what I really discovered. I tried to bung even some more on the appendices pages. I tried to bung some more information into a few interviews. But even then, it was at like 20% of what I was mulling over in my own mind. And one of the most incredible things that I couldn't get out of my mind for all those years, and I had to perpetually keep putting it on the back burner, was this paragraph, chapter 15 of the Book of Enoch, where the fallen angels are first basically addressed. The Zaziel and the whole 200 of them, and there's other books as well. There's so many books. Book of Jasher, there's Eastern books, there's the Popol Vuh, there's even the Bible, the Genesis.
The two Adams?
Yes, exactly. Exact Corinthians, exactly. So it's not limited. There's plenty of information. However, the one passage, though, that really tells you that something immense took place is that famous passage, and it's on my Female Illuminati website. Everybody can go and read it if they've never heard of it before, where they're talking about the sons of God, so-called fallen angels, coming onto the daughters of man and bearing children with them. Right? This is the famous. All the biblicists know it. All the biblical scholars know it. It's been gone over 1,000,000 times. Books have been written, and so you're looking at this. And yet something kept twigging in my mind. I don't know what it is, but there is an oversight. There's an omission in all the other research. And that is, the omission is this. Nowhere in the Book of Enoch or in any of the other apocryphal works, or the Book of Genesis, for that matter, that speak about this interaction between the Anakim, the Anunnaki. I don't care if you go to the Sumerian script. I don't care where you go. There is no information that there was resistance on part of the women who became the daughters of the Nephilim. Now, I don't know, maybe it's nothing, but the point is, I would say, where's the fighting? Where's the men rising up to fight back, to save their women? Where's the women resisting arrest, so to speak? Where is there anecdotes about that? You have everything else, but you don't have that. Now, as most scholars do, you just bypass it and assume that these women, were basically abducted and forced against their will. But the trouble is, it doesn't say that. And therefore, and I admit it is speculative. I admit publicly it is pure speculation. But speculation can go a long bloody way. Then we speculate. What happens? This is just a question now. What happens if the women went with them willingly? And as a matter of fact, the Book of Enoch and other scriptures actually hint that that is the case. They say that the daughters found these fallen angels types, this group, the Nephilim, comely, attractive. I even beat that to death in my Atlantis book when I talked about how the women, another group of women, not the women we're talking about, But the daughters of the Lemurians saved mankind, saved the Adams, because they found the Lemurian sons of the serpent comely and listened to their counsel and helped the Adams become free to set up the civilization later of Lemuria. And as a matter of fact, not only that, but the very word Murias or Lemuria means motherland of humanity. The motherland of humanity. The land of the immortal serpents. So wherever we go, yes. This is known. It's known as Silipatarkan in Tamil, because it was meant to be south of India and down there near Australia. This is where they think the Lemurian culture was strong. Oceania, what have you. So everywhere you go, you see the serpent symbol. It's ubiquitous, used by both sides, which of course complicates the symbolism, but there you have it. And you have this good, powerful coterie of women who decided to realize that they were enslaved. And so in other words, these books insist that there was a attraction. Well, then I'm saying to myself, if that was the case, then couldn't there also be, on the other side, an attraction? Couldn't there have been some of these women who didn't want to leave with Lemur and liked what the sorcerers of Atlantis were doing and actually were part of that structure, that infrastructure? And what do you know? The Sumerian records actually indicate that this is in fact the case. So if we then go to the next step, if we now are assuming, for argument's sake, that a group of women, just like one group left and went towards freedom, another group stayed behind. This is the group that I'm now interested in. That this is a female coterie who are also very attracted to this original Nephilim. And why? Because of their power, because of their technology, because of their looks, or I don't know what. Let's just keep that in abatement for a minute. We're just assuming that one group did, in fact, collude with the enemy, right? Okay. Then we move next to the next step. What? Because remember, for every crime, there's a motive. And if you are talking about a group of women who would literally collude with an enemy and basically betray the whole human race, there has to be a bloody good motive for that. And that's where a lot of other people would just, pack it in and they wouldn't be able to grasp it. But I think I know what it is. And it has to do with the female psyche. So, because remember, there's an old scientific axiom, by the way. I don't know if you know it, but it's been pointed out by some of the most senior scientists of the world. And that is that no theory in science has any validity whatsoever unless you can see it in action today. So they're talking, and of course, let's think about the Big Bang. Let's put it in the context of the Big Bang. All the refuters of the Big Bang, and some of these are the most prestigious scientists that have ever lived or have lived, that's one of their arguments. Since we don't see any such event cosmologically taking place today, it's very spurious to be talking about that one happened in so-called hypothetical past. This is the kind of way they frame their science, and it's very strong. It's very, very strong. If a scientific event is capable of happening, then it must be seen to be happening now. In the atomic realm or wherever you look, we must see evidence of it today. When you don't, it doesn't mean that you don't speculate. It just means that that cannot be moved to the level of true fact or true theory. Well, the same thing goes with what I'm saying. If I want to
feel that way about Darwin, actually.
Oh, I was going to say that as well. You're right. This is one of the bugbears of the Darwinian, and they themselves know it. It's a weak point. So now if you shift over to psychology of humankind, I would say the same thing. If I'm trying to discover or understand what was going on in the psyche of these particular women, I then must look into the world and find its corollary here. I must be able to do that, and I do find it, and it's called envy. And it's purely the kind of envy I'm now going to describe is unfortunately, although some men do have it, a version of it, it is almost entirely a female complex, what we're going to describe now. I won't be long-winded about it. I'll just make it very short, but people can research this if they want. It's bona fide. Just go and ask any psychologist, and many of these psychologists are women, so this is not some misogynist statement I'm going to make. What I've been studying and reading comes out of the works of the latest psychologists, and many of them are women. And they claim that there are certain women in the world who have not only the famous father complex and what have you, but we know that nature, Mother Nature, has made the woman physically weaker and with less endurance and less questing ability than the male. Not all women, obviously, I'm speaking generally, but in general, even children, a young infant kid can easily, beat the same age girl in a fight. So nature has done this. We don't even need to, go into the reasons why. This is just the way it is. That man has the tensile strength. He's got the muscular strength. He's got the sense of endurance, and he's got the tenaciousness, to hunt and to kill and to deal with the blood and to persist and to fight off enemies. He's physically stronger, in other words.
Okay.
But by definition, the female of the species, the sex, female species, is weaker physically. Now, the healthy woman is accepting this. I'm weaker. I support the male. I'm in the tribe. They do what they do. I do what I do because I've got other strength. I've got psychological strength. I've got other kinds of strength. But the neurotic woman isn't like that. The neurotic woman actually blames nature and ultimately then, transfers hatred onto males for the very strength that they have because they believe that they're weaker. And some women embody a neurotic hatred of themselves and also a neurotic hatred towards men and a neurotic nature towards God or towards nature for the fact that they've been born weaker. That's it.
And maybe they transfer that onto that envy of man's nature being stronger. It can be eroticized almost for a woman, because I've heard women say that they find a strong man, a stronger man, more erotic. So maybe that envy is sort of displaced or replaced.
Oh yes, and the envy itself can have good aspects as well. But I'm just being very, very general here, right? Because other people can fill in the blanks and think about this, give it some thought. As far as I'm concerned, there are two kinds of women. They're seen today, and they must have been there in the ancient world, and I'm damn sure they were. There's the woman who admires the male for his strength and has a complete understanding of her own powers and her own strength and her own abilities. The strengths to bear children, the strengths to be there for the men when they're wounded or when they're having a difficult time emotionally, and so on. And the strengths to deal even with other women. Then you have the neurotic woman. There's no reason to believe that this neurotic kind of woman is only a product of, the modern world. I think that's a mistake. I believe that this person, these kinds of women, so when these Nephilim came here and they sent their little groups to visit, I think, a lot of the legends tell us that when they first came, they appeared to be gods. They appeared to be doing good. This is the only reason for this is because they were scanning the shit out of everybody. They were checking out the tribes. And they brought a lot of them to Atlantis. But before they did that, they were curious. They were finding out where the weak spots were. So in the beginning, these contingents went around and they sussed it. They sussed up. They were not only reading these people of the earth, our indigenous ancestors, pre-visitation ancestors, they were sizing them up not only biologically, but psychologically. And they suddenly came upon this fact that when they interview some of these women, and they interview them deeply, they talk to them, they find out. And remember, these people appear to be the gods, man. These people appear to be the angels from heaven, all right? So you're doing a lot of talking about your problems to these people. And so they are suddenly working out through the years that there are these women who have this neurotic animosity to the fact that nature has made them the weaker sex, and they can't do this and they can't do that and what have you. It's this kind of woman, I believe, that then was seduced by the Nephilim and went willingly with the Nephilim. Because what did the Nephilim have that could in fact equal the male strength? Technology. Technology has always been about that. For instance, if I went anywhere now, if you and me went to some primitive tribe, God knows where, and showed them a computer screen, they've never seen this before, and we're showing them through satellite images of New York City with everybody walking there in real time, and I was able to tell you, and you were able to tell these people, you had a translator there, that with a push of the button, I can kill all these people walking here. Now that is some bloody power, right? And that's the kind of technology that when these women were introduced to it, they became very enamored by it because they already had the subconscious need to rival the muscular strength of the male and the power to wipe out huge groups of people, to do all sorts of crazy stuff, let alone flying around in the spaceships, and just the physical look at the weaponry that they had and all the rest of it. I think absolutely mesmerized these women, and they became willing servants of this power. And then in reward for their allegiance, for the reward, this particular sisterhood that we're talking about was given incredible dominion over the world for various reasons. They were seduced, they were initiated into the power of technology, and I'll be proving this. There's not going to be any doubt in it when people, look at what I'm producing here. They did get seduced by it, and they were given dominion over cities and countries and what have you in the world. They were given this kind of dominion in response to their their collusion, right? And this is one of the reasons why the symbol for DNA has always been serpentine, and the serpentine symbol equals the female. In fact, a very hieroglyphic in Egyptian for a woman is a serpent. And then you take it to the next step and say, then why is it that the caduceus of Hermes and the symbols for the DNA is also serpentine? Whether you know it or not, you're looking at a female symbol every time you look at a DNA spiral.
Hermes being the winged messenger of the gods too?
Yes, but there's more to this than meets the eye. The symbol that he's carrying is actually a female symbol, by the way. And I'll have to draw more pictures about that as later on in the actual program that we're doing. But in the Norse, in the legends, in the legends of Ireland, the people who read my Atlantis book, they'll realize that there was a moment after the Great War of the Gods where the queens of Ireland called the people together. And I have the quote in which they talk about the future and they talk about the loss of virtue. And in the queen, her name is Bave, by the way. This goddess stands up and says, in the future, men will be strengthless, right? Judges will give false testimonies. Men will be strengthless and women shameless. Now, this is 5,000 years BC. In the Norse Volupsa, in the Edda, you have the queen there also saying about the sisters of blood, the sisters who will go with other men, right? Who will deceive their husbands and deceive their tribes and slaughter their own sons and put their sons up and daughters up for slaughter, right? So in the ancient times,
men today are more feminine and vice versa because of the bisphenol A and everything. Yeah.
Well, that's phenomenal. That is a phenomenal piece of what's been going on. But let's just leave that aside and take it step by step. In the ancient legends, you have a distinct reference to women who remained protectors of the tribe, remained vigilant against the enemy. And you have another group over here. Because you know as well as I do that the moment a man comes out with information like what we're talking about, you can have every woman in the world, ignorant women, throwing fists up in your face and complaining that you're a misogynist, which is far from the case because anyone who really knows my work knows that it's loaded with eulogies to the female and to the goddess and what have you.
Well, exactly. When I talk about makeup being making you sterile and don't wear makeup, girls, you soon get flack. Yeah. So please continue.
Right. Exactly. So just want to make that caveat because if people think that's where I'm coming from, then you need to go and pick up my Goddess and the Hermetic Tradition DVD, or read the chapters on all my books, and you'll find out this is not where I'm coming from. It's nothing to do with that. So, going back to the story though, when the Nephilim gave the dominion to the female, it was only a matter of time before this particular sisterhood used their technology in a negative way. This is the next step that has to be factored in. They did not use their power benignly. All right, they hated the other women who had relocated to Lemuria, and they hated men. And my research has led me to believe this: that the female sisterhood on Atlantis, right? These are the descendants of the warlocks, their wives, their sisters, their queens, initiated an all-out global destruction or annihilation of all the living men that existed at that time. And that, now we're not talking about the population that we see today in the world. The whole planet at that time, maybe only had a few 100,000 inhabitants. We're not talking about what we see today. But nevertheless, an act of genocide, in my reading of of these myths, I believe that the sisterhood were either stood by and let this happen, but I'm even thinking that they themselves initiated it. And the reason is because they didn't need the men anymore. With this alien technology and the alien skill, and we're talking about the power to even create hybrid beings. We're talking about the Neanderthals, and we're talking about beings who are genetically hybrid. And of course, let's not forget the most important anecdote about the Book of Enoch from that passage, which is that children were born from these liaisons. So in other words, the women didn't need the man anymore. They were marrying and mating with the Anki, the serpents from heaven. They were bearing children, and by either mating or by genetics. And therefore, they had these solar children. They had the children of the Nephilim, the ones who hold the Ankh, meaning from heaven and earth tied together. Joe Blow out there, the man that they had known all these years through the pre-visitation times, were an obscenity to this particular group of women. They didn't need them anymore. And so I believe that for one reason or another, they were annihilated. Almost all of the male population of the world in a genocide so furious, so horrible, and so merciless that it had to be erased from the collective psyche. We spoke earlier about the fact that the presence of the sisterhood has been repressed to such a degree it barely exists. That is nothing compared to the memory of the genocide, of the slaughter of the female criminal history we're talking about. And with a push of the button, speak, something happened where plague, or I don't know what, the entire male population of the planet was annihilated, almost to a man, except for probably a few, troglodyte-type servant groups.
Well, you could only do that with some sort of gene-specific bioweapon, couldn't you? Which presumably
that's right.
These people
and they had
would have had.
And they had it. And they used it. Now, the next step to that is this. They did it because the idea was that the technology would take over. But what do I say in the Atlantis book? Something happened, a variable happened, that none of these people, in that book I just said the Nephilim, we didn't divide it into anything to do with male or female Nephilim. Now we can broaden this out. Now we can say that, yes, exactly, the catastrophe of the earth responding to the war of the gods helped destroy, not all, but a great deal, the most important technology, the spacecrafts and all of the stuff that they've hidden, from us, which the Lloyd Pies and Michael Cremos are fantastic at covering that this stuff exists. Well, all of this stuff was destroyed, so much so that so many important parts of it were destroyed, made the Nephilim, if we just go by the Atlantis book, I say that the Nephilim then were basically reduced to almost as a primitive a level as the people that they had colonized. Now we can branch it out and say that the female sisterhood found themselves, to their horror, what have they just done? They just wiped out the entire workforce. All that muscle is now dead, and you have lost your technology in the war between yourselves and the Lemurians, who are not going along with this gig, right? So now the entire planet, including these aliens, have found themselves in an unbelievable predicament. And so as then time leads up from the prehistoric into what we now laughingly call the historical era, there was a quandary, not just the quandary of how to resettle from the lost lands that are only recorded in the legends, like Atlantis. They're all destroyed, so there's a regrouping to Britain, shattered Scandinavia. The Lemurians are resettling on Australia and India and in Ceylon and other places like that, and I would say even South America. The Lemurian culture was in Bolivia. There's remnants of it in Bolivia and so on, Andes. So there's all this regrouping, physically, topographically. And there's also the worry about what we do now. This helps to answer your question about the length of time it's taken and the incredible seeming patience of this group. But let's move back and say that, look, they now discover to their horror that because they don't have the technology, they now need the workforce back again. They were stupid to wipe out all that heavy muscle. So then there's a new wave of men being created, every one of them with alien DNA, because that's the gig now. There can be no pre-visitation creatures born again in the same sense, because I believe what I said in my Atlantis book, that all the men of the time were Homo Atlantis. But Homo Atlantis includes not just male but female. And so at the dawn of the historical period, the towns, villages, civilizations that you see were apparently ordinary men and women, although I say that these people were with alien now, started mating, and the normal kind of civilization that we know today, top-heavy with male and females, began. So, and it was needed because you need to have them enslaved. Now check this out. Last year, quite late last year, BBC television produced a program about the latest clay tablets that have been discovered. Some of your listeners may have caught this show. Some of the latest, sort of Zachariah Sitchin-esque story about the latest clay tablets that have been discovered in Sumeria. They've just been deciphered last year. And what do they find in those clay tablets? They find the name Adama. But to their shock and horror, it did not refer to an individual. In my Atlantis book, I emphasized again and again, and in the DVD, I kept saying that your understanding of history will be so much clearer if you stop thinking about these terms, Adam and Eve, in the singular and think of them as plurals.
Right.
Last year, BBC admitted that the stela that they found, or these clay tablets, refer to the word Adamo or Adamu in the plural. And they went further than that. They even found out the definition of the term. And the definition of the term, Adama, in the Sumerian, was slave. He who was born from the earth, he who was put together by the gods, the slave. As far as I'm concerned, that clinches 12 years of the publishing of the book and research before. It's very crucial. So what the upshot is that a new generation of men to replace the pre-visitation men was created, all of them hybridized. They mated with hybridized women, and the historical period opens in the way that we do. But one thing is different. When you interview women today, and you talk to them about the catalog of male crime, they will always tell you that it's a problem, that women have been second-class citizens, and women have been oppressed by men. And of course, we know they're not wrong by any shape, by any standard. They're not wrong. In fact, they are quite right. Why did that predicament occur? My thesis is this. The reason why in the historical period throughout the world, women have been kept even the word female means evil woman or evil male or mal even being, fey is meaning evil one, evil witch. And even if you use the word mal in French, that means evil. So even the names for women have been, denigrated. And women themselves have obviously been in a very clearly second-class status. The sex has been since the opening of this historical period. But the reason is justifiable. Now, let's go very slowly here because I don't want people to mistake what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's justified, but I'm saying that it is justifiable. And it is justifiable in exactly the same way as any woman today would say that their hatred of a male or their potential crimes against a male, and I don't mean just physical crimes, I mean emotional crimes or any other kind of, like you said, the incestuous sexual crime, the seduction crimes, all of that. A lot of women, and in fact the vast majority of women, will always, unless they're extremely rational people with a very good understanding of psychology and history, almost all other women will always justify female crime and female hatred against males because of what? Because of the catalog of male crime against them. Justifiable male crime, historical, against women, right? The only trouble is, if you are adamantly, and I'm addressing women here, if you adamantly believe that that is the case, then unfortunately you have to also accept the other side of that coin. And you have to do it unemotionally. You can't get into your emotions. You have to accept the other side of the coin. Because if it could be proven, if proof could be shown that women, your own sex, in a prehistoric period of time, committed an unbelievable, unspeakable act of violence against mankind, it would not only justify my point that women have been kept a second, and I'm not saying I justify it, I'm just saying it existed. This is an answer to this. Because crime does this kind of thing. If men of the historical period contained a memory of what had been done to their species, they knew about it, then obviously when they got this new lease of life and they were allowed to set up communities because the workforce, the enslavement was necessary, obviously the dynamic within those communities would mean that the man would, not because just of his physical strength, but also his psychological antipathy to the woman, because the woman had done the whole race a crime of such unimaginable proportions. Of course, we know that this does mean that innocent women will be blamed, and as they have been blamed, that's why I'm not telling you that I'm exonerating this crime. This would then lead to the violations of the women down through history, innocent women who mean well and should never have been so persecuted. It will mean that, but it will also mean that there will be this imbalance in the sexes. But it's justifiable. It is not justified, but it is justifiable because there's a racial memory, and so we're talking about racial memories here. And I've often spoken in all my work about the healing that needs to take place of this primal wound, not just the healing of the genetic interference, the healing of the great earth traumas, which I've talked about even recently in Australia on my post-humanism tour. The whole thing was overlaid on this trauma that's been done. Again, I went into it based on the catastrophe and what that did to the psyche. We've got that to deal with. But there's also this other incredible war of the sexes. We know it as the war of the sexes. But that war of the sexes isn't 5 minutes old. That war of the sexes isn't a couple of 100 years old. This war of the sexes now turns up as a feature in this prehistoric concept that women, a group of women, not all women, but a group of women was responsible for such an unspeakable horror, a crime of such unimaginable proportions that the very psyche had to forget it. The psyche was fragmented by it, and the psyche has never recovered from it. But the psyche, as all psychologists know, repressed it and dissociated from it. And the consequence of that was that women then were not trusted. And even good women were not trusted. And so the entire cult of the sorceress, the temptress, the witch, all of this other stuff from the myths and legends arises, and there's a reason for that. Why do you have your Salomes? Why do you have your Liliths? Why do you have your Circes, Medeas, temptresses? Where does that all come from? Well, that's what I'm talking about. We have that in the racial memory, but we disassociate it and think that this is magic. Listen, the magic that these sorceresses of the mythology books and the fairy tales are manipulating isn't magic. It was technology. It's just we change the story. You see, down through time, the story accumulates a lot of debris and gets very poeticized. The women that I'm talking about, this sisterhood, whose descendants still exist, were highly technological. This is important to understand. They weren't just serving wenches. They were very, very powerful queens. And they misused their power back then. And their descendants, biologically and ideologically, still remain today. And that is why it is no longer good to be talking about purely male organizations who have always existed or descended either ideologically or biologically from the Atnists or from the Nephilim. That now has to be branched out. It doesn't change anything about that. But now it is that there's this other presence, this other sisterhood, who has operated down through time. They're the cult of Venus, and they're very much behind the media. They're very much behind these women that they put up in front of the media, these so-called musicians, although I loathe to use the term. But these women are icons and many other more sinister characters you wouldn't first think of. You mentioned the Queen of England, rightly so, and there's plenty of others, names I'll be mentioning. These creatures are descended either ideologically or biologically through these family lines that go way, way, way back. And they cannot be exonerated. They misused an incredible power in the times past, and it's been in the male and female psyche ever since. And it is also, I believe, the real reason that at the opening of the historical era, women have, rightly or wrongly, been put into a subservient position based on this. Now, a woman who jumps up to refute this may well do so, but I then insist again that if you are the kind of woman who uses the male catalog of historical crime, right, if you use this as a theory, if you use it verbally or if you use it mentally, or your mother's taught it to you, I don't care what, but if you're the kind of woman who is ready to exonerate all female crime against men of every description, and also male hatred towards the father and male because of male's catalog of historical crime, well, I'm afraid you also then have to logically embody the idea or take on board the flip side of that, that man also can do the same thing. Now, I'm saying this is all speculative. We're still going to iron this out, massage it, and find out the truth of this matter. But logically speaking, the woman now has to say that if your sex committed an unspeakable crime against man in the past, then men are, just by your own token, equally justifiable in keeping women in a sort of a submissive position. I'm not saying it's right. My God, I'm not saying anything in the world I look at is right. I wish none of this had ever happened. But the fact is it did happen. It maybe did happen. We're talking speculatively here. But I believe that the trail of etymology and the trail of symbolism absolutely confirms what I'm talking about. And, you know, I'll present the work. This is, in fact, you and I are now speaking. It's the first official interview about this, so there's a bit of history there. And so we'll just take it forward in the next couple of months, and I'll finish this work, and we'll see where it goes and what happens and what kind of responses we get from people. But the other thing is that
that's why I've allowed you to just carry on speaking, because I've got the impression that this was the first time you've mentioned it on air or publicly. This new theory of yours.
Right, and so a couple of the most important thing I think for people to just grasp in the early stages is that there's no longer if you're going to mention male violence, that males are capable of violence, we have to now look at the female criminal history. You know, there's a reason why the ancient myths had these Circes, these Salomes, these Pandoras. Hey, don't open the box. Oh no, she opened it, and all the horrors of the world came forth. Now, why is that? As I said, why is there a female figure right there at the beheading of the John the Baptist, which is all this occult symbolism? Why does Jesus Christ look effeminate? Well, what the hell, why don't they paint him with a beard looking like a regular guy? Some of them do, but in the early days they didn't. They painted him very female-like. Same with John the Baptist. There's a lot of weird symbolism going on here. The Eleusinian myths. We got the Statue of Liberty. As I said, the Bacchanalias, the Eleusinian myths of the female rights, of tearing the male to pieces. We've got the Statue of Liberty up there. We've got all this symbolism that we see in the architecture. I got questions about all of this. And again, going back into this cult of Venus that I talked about in the Age of Manipulation, how it's right behind these rock icons. It's right in there in the drug, the mushroom cult. the whole psychedelics.
Right.
It's loaded with this female sexual, pansexual symbolism. Look at TriStar. Look at Columbia Pictures. Look at the logos that they're using.
Yeah,
You know,
I've heard you speak about. I've heard you speak about how your brother was studying album covers for their symbolism, and how sort of major artists had a real struggle to have their say in what was depicted on the covers.
Oh, they had great difficulty. And again, that's another aspect of looking at the symbolism to decode it. Like I said.
Interestingly enough, though, apart from the obvious like Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath, you mentioned it was the seemingly innocent sort of cutesy bands like Duran Duran and the Smiths.
Well, they're androgynous.
Or the not so cutesy communards that had some of the most interesting symbolism.
Yeah, of course, because it's a situation in which the androgynous sort of David Bowie,
hermaphroditic sort of agenda.
Yes, exactly. This is again not been gone into it with much detail as it needs to. There's a certain kind of male that they go for, that they find very attractive, because that's that old. In fact, this is one of the threads of symbolism. They go for that androgynous male because this sisterhood is infatuated with Adonis, with Apollo. It's their old stuff again. It's the solar child, man. It's the solar child. The Jim Morrisons. They got the Diane Water, the Brian Joneses, the Bob Marleys, all of this kind of stuff. The other guys they leave alone because they don't fit the symbolism. But the Mick Jaggers, they do fit the frickin' symbolism, and plenty of others do. Some do, some don't. I mean, look at America again. Under a female Statue of Liberty. Why? It's meant to be a very male, masculine, materialistic, hard-ass country. My foot. It's born under the female sign of Cancer. People go and watch my little DVD, my little free DVD on the Declaration of Deception. I figure I have right there the chart of United States of America, emphasizing it was born. Yeah, I emphasize in there it was not only born under Cancer, the female sign of the zodiac, for goodness sake, but it was also born under the star Sirius.
Osiris,
Yeah, which has always been considered the star related to the female goddess. What do the actual presidents sit in? An oval office. The pentagon is a female symbol, the 5. The pentagram is always the symbol of the female. It's nothing to do with Satanism. It's to do with a female. Femma, 5. Phi ratio. The phallic obelisk, yeah, obviously that's male, but the oval office in which they actually sit is the symbol of the egg of the female.
So given all this, we've actually literally been chasing the devil's tail.
Well, you see, it's a game of deception. Many people have said, while we are facing the fortress of the male Illuminati, beating on the door, going, "Let me in! I'm going to strangle you." And here's Alex Jones is ready to do it. While we're bullhorning them, well, we are literally facing the battlements up on the hill, out of sight, on horseback, is the real enemy. They're right exposed. They're right there. They're right behind you. They're up there on the hill. You see that shining glass? But they want you over here because there's a game, an incredible crime that's been committed, so intricate, so web-like, so absolute. Thousands have gone into the ditch, charging to be slaughtered, mowed down like something you've seen in frickin' Tolkien's Lord of the Rings here. And all the time up there on the hillside is the real feud. The top of the pyramid is detached, isn't it? The 14th level.
It reminds me of, it's quite a descriptive way of looking at it. It kind of, an image flashed into my mind of Schindler on the horse looking down on the ghetto being cleared by the Germans.
Isn't it? That's how it's all done. It's always done like that. Yeah. It's always done like that. You create distraction, and it's easy to distract.
Yeah, that's the magician's trick, isn't it? What the left hand is doing, the right hand is doing something else.
That's right. But when you follow the trail of symbolism, you say, why is a man inside woman's clothes? Why is a man inside a dress? Right? Or why has he got a cup, a chalice?
I suppose people would say, well, didn't they all dress like that in those days? But no, I guess what you're getting at. Mm. No, you talk about Osiris having a communion with Isis, the primal couple. This kind of links into what you're talking about here, and their offspring is Horus, and Horus grows up to be the new father who marries with the mother, and you call it an endless cycle, but you're insisting that it's incestual mythologically, not physically.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's fascinating. I wanted to ask you a bit more about what you mean by mythological motifs. The elite, right up to this day, have inbred with each other, whether it's to retain the psychopathy, being a psychopath within the family, that's essential to be able to rule ruthlessly, or whether it's a reincarnation ritual. And I was listening to you talk about the incest being mythological, not physical. I thought perhaps that the elite are mimicking, sort of playing out the roles of their ancient gods they look up to.
Yeah, they are, because remember, the kings and queens of Egypt, and I assume other countries as well, always styled themselves on the gods. They said that their mothers and their fathers were the gods. This is well known. And the seat that they sit on, you only have to look at the Queen's coronation thing. I hope people will go down and watch that little thing I put up. That little 5-step mound that she's on, it's a square blue thing. That's to represent the hill that all kings, think of Tara, it's a bloody hill. Not only that, but it's a woman's name. So they're sitting on the mound of the womb of the mother to be coronated.
Is Lenin's tomb a 5-step pyramid as well?
I don't know that. Yeah. But even the fact that churches like Chartres Cathedral, most churches are on they're on a raised platform. In fact, when we were in Perth, got up early, always, when I was in Australia, we were all over the frickin' place looking at all the symbolism. Get up early and went around. The churches in Perth are all on a rise. The Queen of England's coronation is on a rise. The kings are on the rise.
Pictures, yeah. I saw those pictures.
Yeah. They are all on a mound. That mound is one of those mythological... See, history is mythograph. History is studied with mythographs. It's just concoction. It's like we were saying earlier about the concept of Jesus as being, is he the same guy as presented in the Bible? Did he exist? No, he didn't. That's why you're not going to have much luck finding any evidence for him. But in fact, even the Jesus Seminar said that over 80% of the words ascribed to Jesus cannot be authenticated. Well, Jesus Christ, that's no surprise to me. Josephus, the one entry that for centuries Christians pointed to say, there it is, that was proved to be a forgery. So this is the kind of thing we're talking about. But then you have this whole, I didn't finish the thing about America. It's not only under Sirius and under Cancer and the Oval Office concept and the Pentagon being pentagram, which is female symbols, by the way, but it's also some of the most important findings of America were done under the star Spica in Virgo. Virgo being the Virgin. It's the image you see on Columbia Pictures, by the way. So the Statue of Liberty and the Columbia Pictures image doubles up as a symbol for Virgin Virgo. So what is all it? So this is just this female symbolism we're seeing all over the place, and the more you look for it, the more you see it.
So the last 100 years, well, the last 50 years really, women's roles have become more prominent and has been allowed to take over more prominent positions. Prime ministers, leaders, top bankers, think tanks, powerful sort of 80s shoulder pads and everything. It all started in the 80s. I remember when women's role became more prominent and demanded equal pay, if not more. So it was it felt like we were making progress as a race of people, that women were finally getting the attention they deserve and able to play their role in the world. So given what you're saying, is this deliberate to bring the feminine back into the power stage?
No, because we have never had a true concept of either masculinity or femininity since the dawn of time. What you call femininity or another person calls masculinity are perversions of those things. You have to look very deeply into philosophy to even find a true definition, even if it's possible. So, and also, based on what you're saying, the very idea of progress is actually an illusion, because all psychologists know that an individual does not make progress until they look at their shadow side, and also neither does a culture or a civilization or the whole of mankind or humankind make progress until they look at their criminal history. You have to look back. You have to look back to know who you are. You don't look to the future. Today I
know that progress is quite a Masonic term too. I am aware of that.
Right. See, and it works this way: that we are living in a society that is basically utopian, and we're a heartbeat away from this post-humanistic concept, which is future-oriented. Every kid going to school, the way the teachers bring you up, and the way the parents bring you up, and the way TV and culture bring you up, is to be future thinking. But the future is nothing. The future is a wilderness. The future is hypothetical. To know who we are is what we've done, and that's the past. You don't want to become overly absorbed in it.
The guardians of the planet view themselves as steering the planet, planning the future. And we know that the future is planned out. All our culture, right down to the pop songs we listen to, our culture is handed to us. And the word itself, culture.
That's right.
Talking about the mythological motifs. I mean, I remember you speaking in another interview back there. It was Pilato, James Pilato. Excellent interview. You talked about Back to the Future, Terminator, Star Wars, Die Hard, Magnificent Seven, Rambo, all kind of lone father figures that ride into town, perform the surgery, get rid of the bad guys. The women are all locked up in Magnificent Seven. They're hidden away, and once the job is done, they're turned away and they ride off into the sunset on a lonely road again. And that seems to be the theme in a lot of them. We were talking earlier about the kind of mythological sort of incestual nature of characters in history and in film. So that kind of ties in, doesn't it? They're telling us something in movies, as usual.
Oh, that's right. And what we're talking about, as we said before at the beginning, isn't ever written down in a history, so to speak, but it has been completely chronicled in this other fictional way. When we just spoke a few minutes ago about the perversion of masculinity and femininity, you need to look no further than the media. These accentuated, heroic, Arnold Schwarzenegger, muscle-bound, and in fact, in many cases, even technological. If you look at some of the more techie movies, the male is part machine, the RoboCop, the Terminator types. I've gone into that in my talk I did at Conspiracy Con on the symbolism of how they use, the father figure, the Rambo and Colonel Troughton, and this whole dynamic between the male hero, standalone male hero, and the mother, but the mother is a father. This kind of thing is an incredible dynamic. And I do remember now, as you said it, the Back to the Future, which really has this heavily, and so many other movies do. But again, we must always note that the vast majority of the male figures that are portrayed by the media are obscenities. They are obscenities of masculinity, as the women are also obscenities of femininity. So we're dealing with perversions here, not the real thing at all. I tried to go into this in the Divination and the Goddess DVD, where I went into this very much, to redefine. Remember, a lot of people get up on stage. I've actually seen this live. Many so-called people in this movement get up and speak about female and male when they actually mean masculine and feminine, and they haven't even evolved to know the difference. They speak about the male this and the female that, and not realizing that many women are very masculine and many men are very feminine. So they need to clarify what they're talking about. Masculine and feminine is a whole other world of study and a whole other world of understanding than just male and female. We're not talking about sex here as much as we're talking about psychological profile, about the kind of orientation. Now, our societies have been put before us as very masculine, but I'm accounting for that. I'm saying that, yes, in order to conquer the world, in order to seize, to have armies to go and slaughter, to seize the wealth of other countries, you do need that masculine, crusader front. Women can't do it, so they have the men doing it. And then, as a nice little perk, you will be on the history books snapshots. So when we look down through the snapshots of history, there they are. There's Godfrey, and there's Hugh de Payens, and there's Stalin, and there's all the males, because they got their photos in the newspaper. Blood drenched, here they come, and they want their kudos. Well, they've got that, but that is a ruse, because there's something else going on behind that official history, and that's what we've got to look at, and that's only embedded, only transmitted in the symbolism. Like I said, the presidents of America, and this is only one anecdote, sitting in the so-called Oval Office. I mean, it just goes much, much further than that, especially the dates on which certain things are done, and the inaugurations of this and that and the other, and the design of the various edifices that these people use is always more deep than we can imagine. Because, as I said, this and don't forget that the sorceress side, this sisterhood, never forget for a moment that they despise the other women, the good women, who are nothing to do with this. That's why these other women, the women who came from more of the Druid side, the Wicca side, they've also been taken out down through the centuries as well. Remember the concept about the severed head? You spoke about these Vikings being found with a severed head, and then we just happened to be talking about John the Baptist with a severed head. The whole cult of the severed head,
Yeah.
is age old. What that represents, as I said, it not only represents the transmission
transmission.
the transmission of power, of secret society power from one edifice to another, but the worship of the skull, for instance, is just so old it's unbelievable. That's why even the skull and bones use that symbol. There's so much to that about the intelligence and the drinking of the blood. There's even this whole ritual aspect that is this about the ritual slaughter. I kind of don't want to really get into that right now, but there's a lot into the very concept of what it means to be decapitated and what that symbolizes. And so we have to start getting up to speed with some of this symbolism if we're going to be able to, change the course of the way things are going. Because the main point I'm trying to make is that all criminals, we just spoke a minute ago about all history being mythography, studded with myth, studded with these concocted traits, concocted motifs. But we also realize that the authors of history are psychopaths, and they are criminal. So that all criminals want to hide their crime. So when we're looking at history, we're not looking at something that's very honest. We're looking at an incredible tangle, as you said earlier. It's a labyrinth. All of this is done because we're dealing with people who very much want their crimes to be forgotten, and they have 100 ways of doing that. One of the ways is to set up a faux criminal, put all the blame onto them, send them running, and then all the dogs go after them. So that when you're looking in this direction for the real criminal, and of course this is what we've seen time and time again, the real criminal is, unseen. He's invisible. You spoke earlier about progress. If you really want my honest opinion, the only intelligent people who have a clue right now are the people who are into this particular kind of work. We're not talking about anybody from the normal world having the faintest idea what's going on around them, what history is all about, or why they're in the state that they're in. The only hope for anyone to twig what has really been going on right across the board, and this includes what's happening now, are the people who happen to be seriously, and I don't mean just frivolously, interested in conspiracy kind of content. That small group, and then even a smaller group within that who are serious, because there's a lot of hangers-on and imbeciles who don't know shit, but there's people within that are the only true, intelligent, informed. And I said this at the talk in Australia, and we have two reasons for that. One is we're in an age where we have information that has never, ever become as widely public as it is before. So in other words, we have the researchers of unbelievable skill and awareness who are bringing out facts that the whole human race, from the dawn of history, has never been privy to. That's one. And the second is we have the means of dissemination, the internet. We have the technological medium, which was, again, new. It's modern, you see. So there's two factors that you can obviously see logically we didn't have before. One is the kind of information that our forefathers just didn't have access to. Not that many of them didn't speculate it or think about it or muse it, but now we have it more hardcore about all sorts of things. And we also have this unique means of dissemination where somebody like myself, and let me take myself as an example, 30, 40 years of constant, non-stop, back-breaking research can be delivered in a few minutes in a book or DVD or a YouTube. People don't think about it, but I didn't put that stuff together in 5 minutes. This has been an incredible job, and think about all the other teachers in this movement as well. So suddenly you have all the world from every corner of the globe, of all levels of intelligence, being able to benefit from a person who has gone through unbelievable sacrifice and unbelievable study in relatively short period of time because of the medium in which it is transmitted, you see, low cost, easy access, and so on. These are remarkable changes, remarkable features, and therefore my point is that we then must absolutely be glad for that. We must use it. We must get rid of all the distraction and really make sure that we understand and be very grateful for this fact, because we are now privy, finally, up Periscope. We are able, the clouds are parting, and we have the tools to see what almost none of our ancestors ever saw before. Ordinary person has the ability now to get a glimpse. What they do with it is of no concern to Michael Tsarion. That's now, I don't intrude there. But I'm just saying the simple fact is we have that ability. What you do with it, what you don't do with it, how you think about it, how you configure it, what you think about the person who's delivering it, that's all your own business. But the fact is, the simple fact is, this information is now being disseminated. We're in the absolute proper age for it to come forth. That is non-negotiable. And that, to me, is inspiring and brilliant and gives us a very good optimistic, should make people feel very optimistic. But again, we have a huge mass of people also who are in a state of absolute perpetual ignorance, and therefore, yes, okay, the female got a little bit more masculine power to operate in the world of the beast. Yeah, okay, great, whatever. Man gets a little bit more of this. Life, you get improvements, you know what I mean? You get upgrades to your servitude. Yeah, I'm not really jumping backwards on that. I think it's okay, maybe it's fine. But in the whole or larger context, if the psychology of man thinks that he's going to make progress without looking back to his criminal history and to his own shadow and know what has been going on behind the scenes, I cannot for a moment call that true progress. He's liable to again fall into another trap.
You've spoken before of building a forensic profile of the people at the top of the pyramid, but these people don't want us to know who even the lower henchmen are. That's a quote from yourself. What are your conclusions at this stage of your research as to who they are? Obviously, you're not able to name names, but what are your conclusions at this stage? Where should we look?
Well, I think that I've done as much research as I can. I think all of us, I think Alex and others, we've all gone as far as we can to catalog male crime. Let's just phrase it that way for a moment. I think that the crime of the males has been beaten to death. I think it doesn't need to stop. I'm not saying that. It needs to continue. The exposure of any kind of crime needs to continue. I just think that now, a more subtle, I've always said this, that this thing needs to be turned around like a Rubik's Cube, like a very precious jewel. You cast different kind of light on it, you walk around it, you examine it from many, many facets. That's what I'm doing now. In my Atlantis book, I did it in one way, in the Irish Origins another, in Architects of Control, we brought up more of the psychology, what have you. And it's continuing. Do you realize that people actually criticize me for that? What the hell is wrong with them? You think that this is going to be, I'm going to deliver you this like a frickin' pizza and that's it? This thing is endless. I'll never in my whole life, even if I lived 10 lives, even a person like me, could never come to the bottom of it. It's not like that. It's not just going to be presented to you in a package. This thing is completely to be unpacked time and time again, like a piece of music. There's so many subtleties to it. But the thing is that once you do that, you progress and you start to see things in a new light. In the criminal history of woman, the criminal history of the female, I went into it in the Age of Manipulation 1, where we looked at the Tuesday Wells and we looked at these vile, you could call them the cult of Venus again. This is a very peculiar group who are part attached to the Dionysian cult. You can call them Dionysian as long as you allow for the fact that Dionysus himself was an androgynous entity, and so on. He was one of these solar children that you mentioned, like Horus. And the female cult around them have their own particular kind of perverted symbolism. I don't like it. I'm saying it's bloody weird, but they have a type of kind of ritualistic. The Queen's coronation is one glimpse into that kind of ritualism. Remember, for instance, that she's given 2 rings, ruby and sapphire. Why? Those colors appear on the British flag, the blue and the red, as they're known, which again goes back to the George and the dragon and St. Michael and the dragon. Then you have this moment in the coronation where they bring this canopy over her head, a very private moment in which nobody but nobody...
Yeah, the Archbishop of Canterbury sort of whispers something to her, doesn't he?
He whispers something to her, and I believe that has to do with the sisterhood. I'll say nothing more about it, but I believe that moment of the ritual has to do with something regarding the sisterhood. Next thing you know is that she's approached by 3 dignitaries, one of whom, the third one, 3 is always important in Masonic, so the third one does something the others don't do. It's a Duke of Kent, it's her nephew or whatever. He comes forward, kneels down, he whips out a piece of paper and he reads from it, and it's her. She's meant to now endorse the secret society. She's meant to say, I am one of the secret societies and I protect you guys. This is this moment, something to do with the Scots Rite. I think it's got to do with the Scottish Rite.
That's what you think he's saying there?
Yeah, he's the head of all the... Remember, Kent, Duke of Kent.
Kent, yeah.
Kent
he's
is a word.
Mason, yeah.
But Kent means Egypt.
Really?
Yeah, the county of Kent is named after Ken, or Kant, which meant is an old word actually. It's a pun. Again, this is how they do things. These people are punning all of the thinking time. It's the Duke of Kent, the Duke of Egypt, the Duke of the Egyptian Rite. There's even a thing called the Egyptian Rite.
Very high, isn't he?
Very high. And his particular group of Masons, this is another Alpha Lodge. And when I say Alpha Lodge, I'm distinguishing from the one you walk past in the street. That's got nothing to do with any of this. The Alpha Lodges, the one that he is a member of is called the Order of Mark. masonry, and it's two columns, two like a chess pieces, these two little turrets or towers, in the center of which is a red cross again, the red cross going back to Egypt and to the dragon court. So he gets down on his knees, this kind of caper, and then they have this moment where she's handed this orb. You have staff in one hand, the scepter, the famous scepter.
The world, yep.
Right? And her, by the way, just as an anecdote, her mace. You spoke earlier about what a joke, this whole idea of republic and democracy is. Yes, that's right. The opening of Parliament, meant to be the houses of Parliament, cannot open without the presentation of the Queen's mace. And it sits there all the time.
Yeah.
There it is. She controls the whole lot. It's all under aristocracy. It's all under these people. But coming back to the coronation, she's handed in one hand the... she's sitting on, by the way, she's sitting on St. Edward's chair. And basically that's all you need. If you know the history of St. Edward's chair, and I go into it in the Irish Origins book and also in the Queen's Coronation, because remember, the Queen's Coronation, right, is an appendices of the Irish Origins book, by the way, just in case people think these are all separate. They're not. That video was put up as an extension or an appendices of the Irish Origins book. So St. Edward's chair is nothing more than the chair of the Milesian Atenists who first came to Ireland. Scota, Ireland was known as Scota. Do you know that Ireland's name was Scota? When the Irish moved over to Scotland, when the Irish invaded Scotland, they gave the name of their queen, this is an Egyptian queen now, to Scotland. So Scotland is named after the daughter of Akhenaten. Unbelievable. She's buried in County Kerry. Right. So the Queen of England is sitting on a chair that's got a pyramid at the top, this triangular pyramid. It stands on 4 lions, which are the Lion of Judah, the Lion of Akhenaten. It's one of the only symbols he allowed. It's a solar lion. 4 of them, no doubt. In one hand, she's been given a scepter, which is always male. And in the other hand, she holds what's known as the orb. And on top of the orb is a little cross. Now, people should go to type in on Wikipedia or one of the search engines the symbol of Venus, the symbol of the planet Venus. And or if you know it, write it down on a piece of paper. Just look at the astrological sign for the planet Venus. And then go and look at the orb that the Queen holds in one of her hands and see if there's a similarity. So in one hand she's holding the Brotherhood, the symbol of the Dragon Brotherhood, and in one hand she's holding the symbol of Venus, the Sisterhood. So it is symbolism, symbolism, symbolism. And the message that they're telling you is if you're too dumb to get the symbolism, then you just keep on getting out there to work every day and you keep on pushing the wheel because there is nothing going to change in the status quo. Only the initiated man and only the person who's just studied and studied and studied is going to crack this symbolism. It's not going to be told to you from any teacher or from any official source. That's the way they run it. Every time you want to report...
a quick question from Joseph in the chat here. We've just got just over 15 minutes left. I wanted to get to a few questions. It kind of ties in what you were saying, Michael. I was going to ask Michael what his thoughts are on the rituals that the global elite perform and who are the beings that they are contacting. Or can he point me in the right direction for this information about what books to read?
Oh, yeah, he needs to pick up Atlantis. We just put a revised version up on the Amazon Kindle site. Go to unslaved.com, click through and read that book. Read it and read all the quotes I put in there. The symbolism that he's talking about is the archons is one of the terms for them. At the beginning of our conversation, we talked about how part of the historical movement to rebuild the technology, in fact, we kind of didn't really underline that for people who don't know, the loss of the technology was the variable that has caused every aspect of the historical, imperial, aristocratic-controlled process of history, basically. It's so important. We know it's important because the Sisterhood lost the technology, the Nephilim lost it, and therefore they had to have man back, the worst enemy, so to speak. They had to recreate the muscle man to go out and build dig the wells, mine, and plow the fields and build the cities. Moving forward, right, they had to build the technology. That needs to be done with a muscular strength. That was done under the edicts to hasten the process, to get all the bugs out of it. There was a lot of problems with this. John Dee, supreme sorcerer, taking instruction from who? Queen Elizabeth I, hello. The Virgin Queen, right? Instructs her sorcerers to go and contact pan-dimensional beings. They're often known as the archons. Other terms for them is cosmocrates. I use the term macro because they're out of sight of the mind, out of sight of physical technology. These entities sketched out the map and showed them how to initiate where we're at right now. The so-called technological age is the scientific age, and the symbolism of these orbs cannot be understood without this. That's why I suggest this person read this book, because you're not going to find the answer anywhere else. And if you want to decode the symbolism that's around you in the streets, that appears on the magazines and the television, especially the technical one, well, you know, and believe me, before you can even jump into what we're talking about, the sisterhood, I'm afraid you're going to have to do the homework. You're going to have to go back and read my earlier stuff to have the full pieces. If you want stuff anecdotally, okay, but then you're not going to have the whole piece. I've put the groundwork in before, and people need to read the groundwork, particularly the Atlantis book, to know where I've gone, because it's a connection. It's a fulfilling that study, that particular historical frame, time frame, has been transmitted by beings that you don't fuck with. You have to go with what they say. You have to do it exactly the way it has been laid down. And so this is this incredibly intricate, but yet at the same time enormously precise and patient movement, one step to the next, to the next, to the next, in a certain ritual order. Now we've moved up to the de Greys and all these klutzes, these creeps who are doing the genetic science, the genetic research and so on. And by the way, Alex de Grey, notice his hairstyle? Interesting that, isn't it? And the long beard and what have you? Yeah, right. So anyway, these characters are all themselves in some sense hypnotized. They're all digging into the secrets of DNA because they're very close now. They're very, very, very close to where they need to be. And the symbolism certainly does indicate. They give you updates. They give you all sorts of updates through the movies and through the symbolism. And my work is hugely based on that, but I must say, on the correct interpretation. I'm not very happy with the kind of interpretation that I've seen a lot of other people in this movement go into. It's pretty paltry. It shows lack of real insight. Some people have their foot far too much in the Christian world still. They're not going to have any hope of cracking any of this if they're thinking along those lines. So there has to be a certain impartiality involved. That's crucial. And especially if you start moving into what we're talking here about the sisterhood, I would say an enormous amount of objectivity and partiality need to be concerned, because you're going to have a backlash. And the moment that you open your mouth and you ever even mention the question of female criminal history, especially to the magnitude of what I'm talking about, which entails worldwide genocide, yeah, I don't think you're going to be invited to too many conferences or too many, TV chat shows, that kind of thing.
Anne Carey from Hastings Against Chemtrails has got a question here. And just a quick note, it's another historical moment today, because the world's first ever chemtrail advert on national television in UK and Ireland is airing for a month. Care of Anne Carey from Hastings Against Chemtrails. That's a milestone on mainstream media. It's 30 seconds long, and it says chemtrails, look it up, why is this happening, etc., etc. Incredible step forward. Anne Carey asks, each time someone known dies, there is always a significance to the date, as some sort of ritual in the Kabbalist's calendar. Has Michael found this too?
I'm pretty much the first one to ever mention that. Is she familiar with my work of 5 minutes or something? I've been saying that for like over 12 years. Yes, of course there is. I'm one of the first people who pointed this out, that the stellar zodiac and the 13 signs of the zodiac and what have you, we've gone into that with so much depth in almost every presentation I've made. So yes, she needs to go and look at my, go and look at the Brotherhood of Death, which is free on YouTube Unslaved, or go to, what was one I just mentioned, the Queen's Coronation, or any of the Age of Manipulation 1. Go and watch it. It's all there.
The chap that was asking before the question, Joseph, about the global globalist rituals, he says I've told him that get his Atlantis book on Amazon, he said. I just typed back to him and said, I've just ordered it. I've heard his stuff on John D and it's awesome. Hopefully the book will go into more detail. Oh yes. It does go into more detail, yeah.
Yeah, we got a revised version up there. Just go to unslaved.com and you will be able to click through to all my merchandise, especially the books. We just put up Astrotheology.
Yep.
last week, and Volume 1 of Irish Origins is there as of yesterday. So there's a lot happening right now, and Volume 2 will be up within a week. So the entire collection will be up on unslaved.com, revised editions, instantly downloadable, very affordable. So again, we have that, and people should dip back into Unslaved or contact me personally, because all the new stuff on the sisterhood and everything else will be, up there as well, videos and also the books.
Femaleilluminati.com is the website for much of what we've discussed tonight, and of course Tsarion.com is your main website, I believe. I've got a couple of questions that are fairly unrelated that I wanted to get to. I heard you talking about Blake 7 and some of the symbology and messages coming through Blake 7, and I've always, for the third time, it's the fourth time I've interviewed you, and I keep forgetting to ask, Star Trek, Make It So, number 1, etc. Star Trek is absolutely riddled with messages and preconditioning and pre-programming, isn't it?
It is, because remember we spoke in the Atlantis book about this other coterie, the Lemurians. They have descendants. They're trying to fight this particular pestilence. And so through books, if it's primarily fiction, they have put out their wonderful works, Blake 7. And by the way, as we're talking about the sisterhood, who runs the Federation in Blake 7? Right?
Who runs the Federation?
Yeah. Anybody familiar with Blake 7? Think of who is the head of the evil Federation in that.
Oh, I forget now. It's been about 30 years since I've seen it, I think.
Yeah, that's a quiz for people. Go check out Blake 7 and find out who Coronation.
It's probably ISIS or something, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not going to say no more. But yeah, when you come to Star Trek, of course, when you come to The Prisoner, when you come to so many great movies, in fact, my whole career did start with studying the album covers and the newspapers and the magazines, and then moving out into the streets to look at the actual cathedrals and churches. The whole thing is symbolism from beginning to end, and that is what really initiates you into it, as well as does the etymology as well. And it's just about one being able to follow it, one being able to have the guts to follow wherever it should lead, as you say, through some of these bands that have this weird repetitive androgynous imagery, or some of this other weird sort of almost satanic imagery. What's it all about? And then you just have to keep on pushing and not get put off, and try to follow wherever it goes, and slowly it will lead you where you need to be.
There was an Olympic kind of ritual going on the Thames. I believe it was yesterday. There was the Olympic rings were on the Thames. Just look back here at my notes, and you may find it interesting because it was a black square on the Thames with the symbols on the black square, floating on the black square, and it was 11 meters high. There's been, when you look back at the Illuminati card game for London, there's 5 people running away from an exploding Big Ben. The Illuminati card game from Jackson.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah.
And apparently the people running away from Big Ben have the same colours as the Olympic rings, etc.
And you said the number 11?
Yeah, it's 11 meters high. The rings are 11 meters high on a black square on the Thames, on the river. Remember we spoke about the ritualistic nature of Egypt, the Nile, water, body of water, etc. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, what I'll say about that is that all symbols of water represent the sisterhood. And remember the pharaoh. If you look at his
queen going up the queen going up the aisle is water on the blue carpet, right?
On the blue carpet, and you'll see the pharaoh sitting on a cube throne, but it's overlaid on a little bunch of wavy lines, which is
yeah.
And the 11 is a number of the sisterhood. These numbers, a lot of people ask me about the numbers. The numbers either represent degrees of the Masonic or other more sinister organizations like the Illuminati, the degree number, or something even more sinister than that. It represents a degree within a degree or what have you. These numbers, yeah. And 11 is certainly...
11 as well, the pillars.
Oh, yes, of course, that's right. And the 1-1 again. So, yes, exactly. The 11 is the number of the sisterhood, by the way, symbolically speaking. Purely female symbol, purely female number.
There's been some new Vatican archives that are going on show. I don't know if you've seen some of that. There's some very interesting letters from 1215 AD and 1500 and various letters appealing for the Pope's help. You talked about the Romans actually being mercenaries.
Oh yeah.
For other people. You also talked about Britain being named after Baratanga, the sea goddess of the ancient maritime sort of Phoenician Irish peoples. I just wanted to cross-reference with you. What do you think about Britain being named after the British Empire? British as in bright, illumined. It was originally spelt B-R-Y. Have you heard of that too?
Yeah, and it does mean bright, because Baratana is nothing more than Bridget.
Oh, right.
Pre-Phoenician, or not, nothing could be pre-Phoenician, but bride, bright, goddess of fire, was Bridget, Bharat, Brit, Bharat. Yeah, this is the same deity.
Excellent. And we've just got 4 minutes left. There is another show on after this, unfortunately. I mean, not that the show is unfortunate, it's just we'd like to talk longer. Interesting little note. Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, SRFM, the highest order of angels. CFR, Kafir, North African stroke Egyptian driver of cattle, and they think of us as cattle. And here's another interesting one. The Royal Institute of International Affairs, or RIIA, or RIA, Hebrew term for Ra. And again, League of Nations, LON, Hebrew stroke Persian word for lion.
Right.
And then NATO, Aton. It's just ridiculous how many. All the major spheres of influence that set policy around the world, CFR, Institute of International Affairs, League of Nations, NATO, they're all going right back to Egypt.
Yeah. The Egyptian symbolism on Masonic aprons. People go look at Volume 2 and even Volume 1 of our charges. We have so many examples of this. How much the Egyptian symbolism, and that the Shriners, think about the Shriners, how they use the face of Akhenaten and the great scimitar sword of the Crusades, and they're always using the symbolism. Yeah, and the fez, they use the symbol of the fez. So there's a lot of Egyptian symbolism there, and that's one of the huge parts that needs to be decoded. When we talk about the decoding of symbolism, you couldn't do better than starting with Egypt and then moving from that point on, because there's so much incredible stuff there.
You were saying it was the Atonists that controlled the Romans. That's right. They were the mercenaries. And the Caesars did their bidding. That's incredible.
Do you know, first of all, Rome as an empire lasted a very short time. And then one other thing that people don't realize is why Rome folded up. Why did it cease to exist? It's because the Roman Caesars and emperors preferred to be in France. They actually moved to France. They were Merovingian controlled from beginning. And the main headquarters, the main headquarters was always in Britain and in France. And Rome, actually, the Caesars relocated to France. This is what people don't think. Rome was a very, very brief bastion of power, as a matter of fact, historically speaking.
Okay, well, we have to leave it there. I did want to talk to you about a phrase I've coined called chemtrainment in TV. Chemtrainment, like entrainment. In A History of Scotland, he's showing Calgacus, and every major character that he introduces is just one eye, or the presenter, Neil Oliver, is standing in shadow with showing one eye at virtually every shot, and they're showing serpents, just random shots of serpents, skull and bones, eyes even on the statue, the number 6 figure. I've made a video, I'll send it to you. I made little screenshots all of it. It's just absolutely ridiculous. In your face.
I'd like to see that.
Because while he's showing sheep and talking about an early sort of laws where no one can be harmed and you can all die lawfully in your beds and no one can die of torture, he's walking under a massive chemtrail cloud and showing you a Celtic cross and little pictures of sheep and skull and bones and serpents. It's ridiculous. I'll send you the video. Michael Tsarion, again, there's never enough time to talk to you. It's always a pleasure, and I hope to speak to you again soon.
Well, thanks for this interview. It's history making. We just made history, so thank you, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate it, Patrick. It's great. I hope to do it some more in the future as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks again.